So here's the question. How do physical therapists like us, who don't want to see 30 patients a day, who don't want to work home health, and have real student loans, create a career and life for ourselves that we've always dreamed about? This is the question, and this podcast is the answer. My name's Danny Mattei, and welcome to the PT Entrepreneur Podcast. Hey guys, Doc Danny here with the PT Entrepreneur Podcast, and the guy I have on the other line, I don't think I need to introduce this guy. If you don't know who Dr. Kelly Starrett is, then you're living under a rock. You need to just stop this podcast right now, go get Becoming a Supple Leopard and subscribe to Mobility WOD Pro and teach yourself something, man, because you're missing out. So, Kelly, I really appreciate you jumping on the podcast with me. This is going to be a fun talk.
Oh, dude, my pleasure.
So tell me about your recent rafting trip, because I know you guys just went out and did some crazy paddling, right? So where'd you go?
Well, I'll tell you, I think you and I were just having a conversation offline, and what I'll say is it is when you own your own business and you are holding the umbrella for a lot of other people, I don't know how many other people make their living off of us, 27, something like that, 28,
a lot,
29. It's a lot. There's a lot of stress involved. And then these incredible, you work your butt off. I mean, remember when you had a dream of going to grad school and you were shadowing at a PT clinic and you were working in the hospital to just get your hours, and you're like, someday I'm going to have a dream. And all of a sudden that dream is here, and you've been working for it for a decade longer. And there's so much opportunity, and you're finally not critically poor. I mean, you're paying off your student loans, you've got this workflow. And then the thing happens where you're like, holy crap, I don't have fun anymore. And it's not that, Gene Shirakabrad and a lot of people bring this up. When you are a physio who owns your own business, there's no off button. We work 24 hours a day. We're always on. We're talking to people, and I don't feel like I ever need a weekend. I'm not like, it's Friday, The work volume is always there. And it's always interesting, and I'm always in it. I don't mind talking to people about what's going on with them, and and consulting, and we just get to do a lot of cool stuff. About 5 years ago, when we were sort of at peak thrust on takeoff, we were just grinding. We decided that we needed to recalculate and refocus our filter, and that filter was, what's the point of all this? What are we doing here? And the point was to get more time together as a family. So when we started running everything through that filter, we were able to say no to things. We were able to say yes to long-term development, but it really clarified why we were working so hard, because we were consummating that loop. So there's intellectual curiosity, professional curiosity, all that's great, and it all gets saturated. But, we've got to carve out time where we're not just, on the wheel, as it were. And unfortunately, I have kids, and they really, I think if Juliet and I didn't have kids, we would literally work 24 hours a day, and, but because we have kids, we don't. And then to your point, we just went on, Juliet and I were dirtbag river guides a long time ago, and we're trying to get our kids to be dirtbag river guides. And so we just got off the salmon, a 5-day self-support trip on the salmon, which was just fantastic. And this was actually the first time I've ever kayaked hard shell with Georgia the whole day. So she kayaked 4 days in a row, which is great. Well, your daughters are badasses, man. It's super cool to see, you and Juliet just are really, it's good parents. Obviously your kids are good. You can tell a lot about a parent or a person based on how their kids act. In my opinion, if your kid's a little shithead, there's something wrong with the parent. And that may sound harsh, but I think it's pretty accurate. And it's hard to blame children, isn't it?
It totally is, man. They're a reflection of you, So anyway, for you guys, I really look at you and Juliet are the combination of you two. Ashley and I, my wife and I, we work together as well, and we really see what you guys value and the way that you structure your family and what you find important. That's really something that we're like, man, who do we want to model ourselves after? It's the Starretts, for sure. Oh. And it's interesting for you guys, because you bring this up, and the idea that if you're willing to do something on your own, you're willing to damn near kill yourself to make it work, right?
That's
so
true.
how do you guys? So if somebody's in this right now, or they're looking to start a business, you talk about this kind of one thing that's so important. How do you keep it coming back to that? Like, how do you check into that and make sure that you're not getting lost and get stuck in this idea or this kind of concept of just grinding it out until you've reached whatever that goal, that mythical goal is.
Right, which never
happens, right?
It never materializes. Well, there's a couple things here. One is I think it's interesting when a lot of good physios now, I think, are realizing that the marketplace consciousness has shifted. I think think about how risky it was to maybe open your own physio clinic 15 years ago or 20 years ago. Yeah. It's just different. The internet is not there. The sort of public awareness around fitness or mechanics, there are always deep niches, but I think some of the, there's a really thriving PT practice next to us here at the gym. And one of our MWAD staffers, Sean McBride, he's an OCS, moonlights there, coaches for us, kind of sees people in a traditional rehab model that takes insurance. And, Chris Chorak, who's the owner there, is just she was one of those people like Mark Verstegen, like Gray Cook, who held the door open for a lot of us, who said, hey, look, I'm going to set up an autonomous alternative to big traditional physio where we can really start to get into more nuanced, hands-on, concierge-like care, right? Like, because when I moved here in 2000, and I was, I knew about Chris Chorak in 2001, and she was lecturing and talking and really holding the community open and trying to serve a community that I think was underserved the way traditionally physical therapy was traditionally delivered. And now, fast forward to 2017, and it looks like her model is a really old model. You're like,
sure.
oh, what he's still doing? Taking insurance? Oh my God. And and so I think, with that in mind, that it's a lot easier now for physios to be able to have a radically different practice set. You can work in, with teams and coaches, and there's just so many things you can do. But when you take it on, come back to your point, is that the entrepreneurship, it is a family endeavor. And I think that's important because when you start this, you're going to need your family support when you are there on Sunday and late. And, and if you're starting a physio practice, because you rightfully should, and the time is right to do that, maybe be in the alternative model, that this world has changed a little bit. I just say, make sure you've talked it over with your partner so that, he or she knows what you're about to, undertake, because it's not for everyone. It's, you have fixed costs and there are big bills and it's scary. And yes, sometimes when you're 10 years in and it looks all successful, it looks like it was a no-brainer, but even just the conversations you and I had when you were still active duty military doing incredible work with the Army, you were like, I had to kind of pull you off the ledge a little bit. Like, come on, come with me. It's better. It's better over here. And what I'll say is, with that idea that it is scary, is that you're going to need the support of your partner. And in this situation, I think you and I are unique, is that my business partner is my wife. And Juliet and I have radically different, tasks, radically different kind of scope of responsibilities. And she is the CEO. And unfortunately, I think one of the things that I saw recently you had on a post, which I appreciated, was said, hey, look, you may be brilliant at connecting with people and a brilliant physio and a brilliant coach, but you're crap at business and you have no training in that. That is not part of my PT education. I had to make a business plan, and do all of that, but that's not the same thing as running a business and figuring out how to set up, recurrent payment and software and insurance. And I think what's nice for me is that Juliet is the consummate CEO, which allows me to do what I'm good at. And she happens to not just be a good CEO, but she really likes it and thrives there. So one, it's always going to be a family business because you're going to need your partners or your family support for it. So keep in mind with that. Two, if you're lucky enough, work with your partner, you have to make sure that, you're not necessarily laying in bed at 10 o'clock at night discussing work and forgetting that is your life partner, because it's easy, and just to be a little bit vulnerable. Juliet and I were both had single working mothers, and we were broke. I mean, Juliet remembers like boohoo us, but she wasn't able to go on field trips because we couldn't afford it. I remember being critically poor with my mom when she was getting her PhD. I mean, we were, it was a donated Christmas tree and no Christmas lights. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We made our own ornaments, and I was never hungry. I was always cared for, but we were broke. And we would run out of gas. Always worried about running out of gas. But the reason I mention that is that set us up for to really feel like, we were hungry to not feel that kind of stress. We were comfortable being risk takers because we were professional athletes and river guides and used to taking on big responsibility. But then all of a sudden we got to a place where we're like, hey, we're figured out how to pay our mortgage. And the next question we need to ask then was, okay, now we need to take a beat and figure out how we can improve our life again. Now we're not a slave to this thing, because it's easy to become a slave. Juliet would like pull out the calendar and she'd be like, all right, you're teaching 4 courses this month, and you only have 3 on the books, so where's your 4th one? And I was like, we got to do that because we know that generates revenue. And so for the first time in our lives, again, we weren't broke, but it's easy to get on the other side, and you haven't taken a vacation. You are taking your business partner for granted, or your business support for granted, right? Your network is for granted. You haven't, and that's why the river trips are so important. And that's why we create a lot of internal rituals in our family where we are working at 100 miles an hour, and then we turn off, click. We have a sauna, we have an ice bath. We try to play. We put phones in drawers, and so that there is, while owning your own business is a 24/7 endeavor, it never stops. We're really comfortable with that and gotten comfortable with that. You also have to have pieces in place so it doesn't rule you. You still rule it.
Well, I want to go back to kind of the beginnings of when you started San Francisco CrossFit and your practice within the gym, because for me when I got out, and I vividly remember the conversation, when you're like, look, Danny, you'll make more money, you'll see your family more, and you'll be happier, and you'll be able to affect the military more on the outside than in, and
right.
I mean,
right. I'm like no, bro, unicorns, rainbows every day. You have no idea.
I think that was like totally it. It was just, and it resonated with me when you said that, and it's something that I really was unsure of what to do. And I remember, back in the parking lot of dreams, back when you guys had the gym literally in a parking lot, you had this little Connex box that you had your table in that was barely big enough for like anybody to even move around. And I remember thinking like, dang, like if people are going to come see somebody in a setting like this, in this little Connex box, like
it was austere.
You can make it work, man. I mean, like anywhere. So bring me back to that, because you started your gym while you were in PT school, right?
Yeah, I appreciate that we're talking to physios here, which is so great, and physio students. It was after my first year, I think I was back, and I in the fall, I had already discovered CrossFit my first semester of physio school, and then realized that I wanted to become certified and open a gym, and it was such a nascent movement. I mean, the CrossFit movement, we didn't, when I discovered CrossFit, there were 5 CrossFits, and we are literally the 21st CrossFit now, and so we've been doing this a long time. And I went to my PT school, I went back from break, and had taken out an extra student loan. They're like, oh, I see you're taking out a private student loan here. I was like, oh yeah, I just need a little extra money.
Yeah.
And I bought rowing machines with it.
Nice.
And barbells. But I realized that, physio school was tough, but there was time in there in the mornings and the evenings. And in full transparency, the strength and conditioning around CrossFit looked very different then. We offered 1 class a day. On Tuesdays and Thursdays it was in the morning, and Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or opposite. Monday, Wednesday, Friday was in the morning, Tuesdays, Thursdays in the evening. Mm-hmm. And then on Saturdays, I taught all the classes. And, what I realized in that moment, taking on a business in physio school really shaped my decision making, and it forced me to view my education through a much more practical lens. And so I was really hungry and viewed everything like, how does this work? Because I'm already going to start to do it, right? And at that time, I didn't have any machinations of of opening my own PT clinic yet. I mean, I was still realized that I needed to go study and be underneath someone and see some surgeries and some complicated cases and have a little mentorship. But it really did, when I wrote up my business plan in my third year with our dean, as part of that communications class, I was literally just, writing out the plan for the business I had already started. I was already there and living. So I was thinking very much about these problems in physio school with the idea, and someone even said this early on, and I think I've repeated it to the physio schools where I've talked, but, even if you're working in a big office or a big hospital, you're still developing your own book of business. People are going to ask you, you're taking care of your, slate of patients, right? You're consulting with people and their families, and so you already have this little mini business within the business, right? Just like going to get your hair cut. You go get your hair cut by a certain person, I think, and so that really got me spun up in terms of really focusing my attention. And then, I went and worked for a POP-T, which, is mixed, I think, a little bit. But it was a guy who I thought was doing really good practice. And his physios, he was in a different office, but the physios worked there were, all Maitland Australian, physical therapists. They were, they taught for MAPS. They were just really, really great manual badasses, and we're all engaged in the business of physio. It just turned out that our clinic was attached to this really sort of fancy sports orthopedic clinic, and we had full autonomy, and there was no weirdness there. But, the 1 year, I saw how much revenue I generated for them, and I made $380,000 for that clinic. And I got to a place where I was bringing in over 50% of my own clients. People were coming to the clinic to see me, and because of, I was making $70,000, and they were coming, so I was generating 50% of my own leads, and I was referring a ton of people for orthopedic surgery. And I literally was like, wow, what's going on here? And it turned out it wasn't the greatest situation to be in, because sometimes these things aren't like that, maniac surgeons and stuff aside. And I realized that all I needed to do was put a table down in my office and put my money where my mouth was. Because I'll tell you, when you are a physio working for someone, you don't see what needs to be done, and you can't appreciate how your crappy sort of employee behavior is viewed. You know what I mean? And whether it's, I'm just like, I don't mean to be like that everyone is always snide or not doing their best, but when you're an owner, you have a very different set of responsibilities than when you just get to show up for work and wear your clothes and see your patients and go home, and people are very, very quick to point fingers and bitch and kvetch, and I think, and what they say in the military, like that's the right of the infantry soldier is to complain, Yeah. But it's and when you're in leadership, it's just you don't get that luxury. Your job is to be able to let the infantry complain, and still you have to do it. But what I'm always down with is I'm putting your money where your mouth is. And so if you think you can do it better, go do it better. And I thought I could do it better, and the only way, or I thought I could do it in a way that made more sense for me. And that meant I needed to put up my own shingle, get my own table, and then go ahead and prove to myself what I thought I knew, which was, hey, I can run a clinic in a better way that makes more sense to me and respects my time more efficiently and respects my ability to go out into the community and generate leads and generate relationships, because that's really what this is about, serving the community. That is what this is about. This is not dentistry. This is, people, have complex musculoskeletal problems from their kids all the way up to, Parkinson's to, people in their hundreds and chronic pain in the middle. And there's a lot of people who need consulting with around, actualizing, helping, there's some notion, I think, in physio that, we've got the answers, or, this is the way it's like. You are a consultant to help people manage what's going on in their lives musculoskeletally, right? And that means in training and lifestyle and in even the conversations around the biopsychosocial aspects of surgery, you're there. So, really that idea of serving a community meant that I was out there having lots and lots of conversations with people, and that turned out to generate lots of leads and lots of, and then I didn't have a bad set of hands, and people got better, fast, and I helped them with their goals, and that turned out to be a good business model.
So what was it like early on with like the way you structured your schedule with teaching still? Like, did you limit yourself to a certain amount of people per day, or was it, man, at the beginning I'm just going to see as many people as I could? How did you structure that?
Well, to complicate things, I had a child my first year of PT school,
right.
So I had a baby.
Let's make it a little harder.
Yeah, that's right. And then I had when I was working for that physician, working with at that clinic, I had a baby born in the NICU. Caroline was born a little prematurely.
Right. And
so I spent 3 weeks in the NICU, and that really, got, clarified things for me even more, that, just sort of the implications of that. And, my wife was an attorney. Juliet was a full-time attorney. And one of the things that I will say was very nice about the way, it unfolded for us is that Juliet was a lawyer. I was a full-time employed either student or physio, and then I had another job, and that was the gym. And when I was still working for this physio at this physio clinic, I still, then we had a lot. I mean, I had a thriving gym with 200 members, during that. So I was moonlighting, at my dream job while I held down a full job, and Juliet had a job. Then when I transitioned over to the clinic, I still already had the gym. So, what I'm saying is that it was nice to have Juliet's support.
Right.
It was nice to have the gym. So I didn't ever have to make a move where I jumped all in and had to make bad decisions. I always was in a situation where I could make good decisions and long-term decisions because I'd never had a cash flow problem. Does that make sense?
Well, you told me one time too, multiple revenue streams is such an important thing. To have, and that I believe the number was 7 is what you
that's the dream.
So yeah, you're like, you want to shoot for 7 revenue streams. And I was like, damn, okay, I got some work to do.
Right. Just so that you're creating an ecosystem.
Sure.
And, and then in that ecosystem, the really thing is your time. So, what we had structured it, for our children's stuff where, we had a nanny a couple times a week. I had the girl twice a week, full time, when all this was going on. And oftentimes I would get up at 4:30 and coach, be home by the time Juliet went to work. We'd do the baby handoff, and then I'd go back and coach in the evening, right, when Juliet got home.
Yeah.
So I was coaching on the bookends of the day. And then, a lot of times, what I would do is I would see 10 patients a day. So I would like Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, or 3 days a week. So I was seeing probably most patient days between 30 and 40 a week.
Yeah.
And it was gristly. And some days I would see 12 patients in a row. I'd work a 12-hour day, and those were 1-hour blocks. And I wouldn't, I'd be like stuffing bar. I just gotta write this note, and forcing some kind of protein shake down my throat.
Well, you guys had that portage on right next to it, so it didn't take too much time to go to the restroom.
That was just a little respect. That was the Taj Mahal of porta potties.
It had a nice plant in it for sure.
Plants, dude. We had bamboo and lights and plants, and literally we had all of the sanitation engineers who came to clean it. We're like, this is the nicest porta potty we've ever seen. I was like, damn right. I think on my resume next to Eagle Scout, it says owned a porta potty for 9 years, right, or 8 years. I mean, it was just So the key is, I think it's easy to, the world has changed a little bit on social media. We got away with the fact that YouTube was very early. People were used to seeing shaky iPhone videos and stuff. And now we're seeing that the world has evolved. I can't pull out my iPhone and make crappy content anymore, shaky content on the spot. The content's the same, but the production has to be a little bit better, and we have to subtitle but it did prove the point, and continues to prove the point, that people are there for the experience and for the outcome. And yes, we had a few people walk around and be like, this is it. This is where I'm training, we were underneath the Golden Gate Bridge, and, it was still deluxe. And I had the inside of the Connex box had nice, wood laminate floors, and it was painted well, but it was not shishi. But what people got was an hour of my undivided attention
Yep.
and care and work and a plan, and that's why they came back. It wasn't the place, and I think it's easy to get caught into the trap of I need my own perfect place. I have to have all of these conditions first, and I hear that all the time. I was just counseling another young physio coach about, his expertise, and he has this idea around teaching movement, and I was like, look, you just need to start, and get a subscription base. And if you think you're nailing it down, go nail it. And the first thing that person did was go out into the world and say, and social media, say, hey, I need who's my business developer, social media. Like, he'd already hired someone to do the job he should be doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he had already missed the point. The point is the thing that you're doing is the thing you need to be doing. So if you're seeing patients, the most important thing you can do is seeing patients. You have that, you worked for that guy who said, how do we get paid? When we see patients. Yeah. And so, it's easy. You can always improve the environment, but the most important thing is to get people into the door so they can see you and you can work with them and for them. And that experience of the fact that it was so rough and tumble in the beginning really clarified the importance of what was important, not necessarily having someone at the front office, but for me to be able to schedule effectively with my own, run my own book, and then really deliver on the pact that I had made with them. You spend an hour of time with me, and we will together work through whatever it is you want to work through.
Well, when I saw the setup that you had, and me coming from the military, I mean, I've treated people in the grass, in tents, back of trucks. I found this like kind of really just mediocre office space in a gym in Atlanta, and set up shop there. And I didn't think twice about like that would be a deterrent to people. But I definitely, I had practitioners ask me, they're like, how do people come see you in this little space? Like it's not like class A office space. And I think what people just take for granted is just how rare it is to get what you're talking about, this undivided attention of a medical provider, and to actually be listened to. It's such a rare thing. And it's also very, it's draining, for you to see 10 to 12 people doing that. I'd imagine by the end, the first few, you probably were way more interested in listening. That's
nonsense. Dude, I was the same guy there was a time where I went through some blood pain. You really bring a good point. That was a grind on those days, but then it wasn't like every single day. But there was a time where I went through a blood panel, and I was talking to the interventional nutritionist about the results, and she was like, so it says here you drink 1 to 2 cups of coffee a day. Yeah. And I was like, there's no hyphen. And then there's a big long pause, and she's like, what? And I was like, well, it was 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. And I felt like 12 more closely approximated how much coffee I was actually drinking. And she's like, are you serious? And I was like, well, I started coaching this morning at 4, I got up at 4:30, started coaching at 5:30. I have two babies, I have this business, I have all these other coaches, and that's 3 20-ounce Americanos from Starbucks. That's 12 cups of coffee. And she was like, geez, what the crap? And I was like, dude, how do you think I'm getting it done? And you can tell there's definitely a time on the old videos where I am skinny and my hair is falling out, and I am at the limits physically, and I was flying back and forth, and and doing stuff like this really unique world came up that Greg Glassman set up for us, where he got people really interested in things like deadlifting and it was just such a diagnostic, but I was teaching a lot, and I would get back Sunday at like 11 o'clock at night or 1 in the morning, and I would go sleep in my gym on my table, and then coach on Monday morning at 6 a.m. And, just like sleep on my treatment table, and then, and there was definitely, that was unsustainable. And I think, the big deterrent for a lot of physios starting their own practice is that you are going to be thin. Like, I didn't hang out with my friends. I didn't, I got this thing started, and I was willing to just eat a whole lot. I don't know if I can do it again. I don't think I have the physical tolerance to do that again and still train and coach and deliver. But, those long days was really one of the reasons that we started Mobility WOD. I was like, hey, look, I need to create another way to communicate so that I can give more information out and can create a database so that I don't have to cover some of these things in this really valuable time that we're spending together. You know what I mean? And if I only have an hour, especially in those first few meetings, to really understand the nuances of the environment and what's going on, and help people reframe what's happening with them from a musculoskeletal way in a different, and give them something to work on and try to shift that low side of control. I needed an additional resource in there. And that, because I couldn't see people 3 times a week and it's too expensive and no one has that time, so that was why I was coming home and I was like, Juliet, there's some basics that people need to know and they don't know. And that was why we started making the videos in the first place, so that I could get people up to a level so that we could actually get to the real conversation, not to the conversation about the conversation. What do you mean? Your quads, you don't know how to do any of this? You know what I mean? We can't start from scratch. It's going to take us too long. So if we started, bookmarking some, and capturing some content in a video format, and then that was really so that I could get people spun up, so when they saw me, they had a base understanding what was going on.
Well, and I've always, wondered this. In fact, the mobility WOD is something that the business of mobility WOD, right? At this point, did it start with the idea of, hey, we can turn this into a business, or did it start just 100% organically where you thought, yeah, this is what I need to do for my patients, and then it kind of grew into, holy crap, this is picking up a lot of steam, maybe this could be a business?
We never saw it it was never a business. It was, it was advertising. It was a way of serving the gym members, of serving, I started teaching, this year marks the 10-year anniversary of teaching the 101 course. So we've been teaching a course on human performance for 10 years now. And that, and Mobility WOD started in 2010. So, we had already been out there and taught hundreds of courses and thousands of athletes before Mobility WOD started. But it got to the place where I was like, hey, we need to do a better job of supporting the coaches with information. This video format seems like I can get a lot of information now. Because, we had a blog, San Francisco CrossFit had a blog for a long time that was early on in the blog story. It was a Blogspot. And I think if you actually go out to, it's like San Francisco CrossFit.blogspot.com. It still exists in the world. You can see the nascent and developing and emergent voices of the gym and of my voice and teaching. But every blog post took a couple hours to write. It takes forever to write a big article and support it with pictures. And subsequently, in a 6-minute video, I can contribute and communicate a lot of information that it would take me several hours. So I was able to basically, take a quantum leap ahead in my ability to communicate what I was seeing and thinking. And we were really transparent because we needed people. One of the things we recognized was that the current physio model was so reactive, and that we had to shift our thinking around where we were delivering care. And I think this is where, the first time we sort of, struck the hornet's nest a little bit was getting people to realize that a lot of what I was doing is non-skilled care and needed to be done in the gym setting and a lot earlier in someone's, physical experience than it was when they were late and hot. And because we saw such large numbers of athletes moving, our pattern recognition went through the roof. And so we could really connect the dots because we saw someone with no pain in the shoulder, but these compensations. Then one day they show up and we see them, they have shoulder pain. And we're like, your shoulder hurts. And notice that you've been swinging around like a crazy douchebag with your bent elbows. And we're like, so it looks like, we were engaged in some wizardry, but we really had this gigantic laboratory going, and realizing that we needed to empower and shift the burden of when we were delivering this care. And I think we have a type 1 error in the physical therapy. If part of our job is prevention, or if actualization, right, of really getting people to the place where they can express themselves in the world the way they want to, right? We can't wait until something is terribly wrong before we do that. And that is what the entire physio model was predicated on and continues to be predicated on. And so and for people to say that we can't impact upstream, it's irresponsible. It's irrelevant. If we could manage all of the biopsychosocial components and get people moving correctly, then we would just really only see pathology and injury. We'd see genetic deformities and abnormalities. We'd see, problems in the expression of the genome around collagen. We'd see accidents. And then, but 90% of what we would do as physios would probably evaporate. It really would, because, I think the human being is so robust. We would still herniate discs and things, but it would be a very different situation. So, I think we all need to conceptualize where our job is and what that looks like. And it turns out, because I was a coach and lived in that world, that was the lens through which I viewed it. And I realized also that if I was coaching, I coached about 9 to 12 hours a week, in classes, and then private coaches on top of that. So I saw patients and coached. Is that, man, it was a lot easier to have, lots and lots and lots of little one-on-one interactions when people were still out of they didn't have pain, they didn't have swelling, they didn't have dysfunction, right? They just had incomplete mechanics, or they were new, or they were learning something. That was the place where I could have the conversations ultimately that I would be having if you were injured.
Well, you bring up the idea of reaching more people, right? And you being able to do that in the gym and seeing more people at once, and movement repetitions, and now with social media and the internet and the ability to reach people to really help them, the potential is really there. So for you own a brick and mortar business and you own a digital business. Which one of those businesses do you feel like is more challenging to actually be successful in?
Well, there would be a time where I would say, Juliet and I would say, owning a gym, because at 350 members, plus all the other things that happen, plus the physio practice in there, plus everyone who's hanging out in there, it's just high touch. There's just a lot of stuff to work on and a lot of needs, as it were. There's just a lot of very special people sometimes, and there's just there's a lot of people in there, and 350, if we're probably at 500 or 600 people, in the course of a month, easily, by the time we look at all the people who've come through and the visitors, and, easily that number, it's messy being a human. And that takes a lot of kind of time intensive conversations. And if you look at, it's interesting, I read in sort of two fields right now. One is complexity theory, which I'm just obsessed with, because really trying to help to view the human body as a complex theory, right, as a complex system. It's been very useful for me. But also I read a lot about this evolutionary biology, evolutionary psychology, right? And so I'm reading, Harari's book, Homo Do, which is his follow-up book to Sapiens, and I highly recommend it. But, if you look at, successful primates, they spend a lot of time not fighting, but curating relationships. And that's exhausting. And it's exhausting as a client or as a physio, because you really are curating a relationship, because that community, that patient client interaction, is so vital and in the heart of what we do. And, now, magnify that same sort of output into making sure my coaches are taken care of, making sure our office staff is sorted, making sure that, that there's just a lot of input. So there's that one piece, and that's sort of emotionally exhausting, and something I sometimes fantasize about not having. And then the other hand, we see that our brick and mortar place keeps us rooted in reality, because we're solving the problems and seeing, it hasn't become theoretical anymore. It's the reality of running a gym and running a business, which really clarifies and streamlines your thinking. So it continues to shape. It'd be great if, a la Maitland, I could see a patient 3 to 5 times a week. That'd be great, but that doesn't work ever. There's no physio model in the history of the world, You remember that there's oftentimes one one physical therapist for 5,000 soldiers.
Right.
Like it doesn't matter how good that physio is, the model is broken. So, on the one hand, it's really great that we keep I'm still learning, I'm still practicing, the gym is still my lab. I actually have classes on the schedule that anyone can take, but they're called Kelly's Performance Lab, where literally I just experiment on people, and things that I'm working on, concepts in the context of strength conditioning. And then on the other hand, the online business is a beast. It is a machine. It's a hungry beast. We have really smart people engaged. We are always engaged in conversations about better practice and generating content and curating content and communicating content. And that is, an entire its own monstrosity of a responsibility,
right?
Even just from the customer service, and so, it's great that we have both going. And again, it's a testament, I think, to Juliet and her management skills and organization skills that the whole thing just doesn't implode. But, on the one hand, it's really simple and elegant because, there's just fewer people involved and we can be faster with the online business, and we can reach more people and we can scale things and, and respect our time and work remotely. On the other hand, oh my God, we fantasize about getting to a day where we turn social media off and walk away, and literally just walk away. And they're like, "What happened to Kelly Starrett?" We don't know. He's that. But I saw some guy with a beard doing squats in the woods, And so I think what's interesting is that it's still really fun, and I don't think we've topped out or nailed it, and we're getting better about communicating and the resources, and we continue to see massive amounts of opportunity and problems, and it's crowded, and we get ripped off, and we have to defend our trademarks, and it's a business first and foremost. So I think because it's so high human touch what we do. I mean, I just sometimes wish I manufactured widgets, like I should just make fidget spinners and call it good. It turns out fidget spinners you still have to ship them and manage them and organize, and you have to have manage the people who are managing them, and I think business always has universalities in there. There are universalisms in those pieces. And so at some point you better become good at business, because that's the thing, and it doesn't necessarily scale infinitely, but, hopefully you can get back to a place where you can not fall into the trap that we start off with, which is you're not seeing your family, because it is all about, you creating a life of meaning for yourself, hopefully doing something that you really like, or at least something that you're good at.
Well, absolutely, and I think you nail on the head too with just the point of people very rarely reinvest in their business knowledge, and yet as physios, I think it's very normal for us to think, yeah, absolutely, I'm going to pay however much money for this continuing ed course, and it's going to improve my skill set. But I know a lot of good physical therapists that will never have a very successful practice because they're not good at management, or they're not good at business. They're not good at marketing themselves. They don't know how to network. So
that's right. Or they don't have the partnerships to do that because it's not their skill set. Right. At least I know that none of this could work without Juliet. So literally, Juliet, totally. Like you asked me what my priorities for the day, I'm like, make sure Juliet is sorted out. Because if Juliet has the resources and is feeling cared for, then my business is not going to fail.
And there's a book called Rocket Fuel that talks about this concept of a visionary and implementer, and it's really interesting because for you guys, that's you too. You're married and you just have different skill sets, but the two together creates a really profound potential for business success. And so what you're alluding to, I believe, is primarily like understand what you're good at and understand what you need to replace, whether that be somebody else or a partner or whatever, but don't try to partner with somebody who's just like you. That's a terrible idea.
Well, you haven't solved another problem. I mean, if we applied that thinking to anywhere else,
right.
Like, it doesn't work. You have a team, you don't have two quarterbacks, and I mean, it's a dumb analogy, but it's the same. And I really think, you hit it right on the head. And the other thing I think that is tricky is that, when you are seeing a whole lot of patients in the day, there is not a whole lot of extra time to you're scrambling around,
right,
to get paid and to be reimbursed and to try to improve your skill set. And theoretically, because you're a physical therapist, you exercise or have a movement practice too, right? You don't just talk about it, but you actually, do Pilates or yoga or run or something, And I think it's really difficult to get ahead of that curve. But I was talking with Gray Cook a long time ago, and we were talking about his first book, and he's like, he said, Kelly, people come up and ask me, they're like, hey, do you think I should write a book? And he's like, if you're not already writing it, don't ask me that question. Yeah. He's like, because I was a single dad, writing chapters for the book that I had in my head on my washing machine at 12 o'clock at night, because that was the only time I could. And it really does come down to will at some point. I mean, where you're going to have to realize that you can lead a better life and have a better business, but you better have a plan, and you don't have to. It doesn't have to be fancy. You just need to do things like answer the phone. Anyone who cancels Mobility Wide membership and calls the number gets my cell phone, and I answer the phone. Wow. Like I walked in the other day yesterday to the gym and pulled out the vacuum, and because everyone else is busy and coaching, and I'm vacuuming up the rope hair, and I'm not that I'm ever too good for that, but you do what needs to be done, and that's all of it until you can find a partner or bring a partner on, or someone who can who's better at it than you are. And in the meantime, it may just be you. I mean, we have plenty of friends who like you who who you do it by yourself for a while. You make it work, and then your family realizes, Ashley's a ninja, and she can do it better than you can.
Oh, she's way smarter than me. I mean, I think that's a no-brainer, right? I mean, and I'm very fortunate too, because just you have a Juliet, and I have an Ashley, and she's just she definitely runs things. She talks in terms of standard operating procedures, right? I talk in terms of ideas and philosophies and like stuff like that, and that would never work if it wasn't for organization from somebody else.
Well, and I want to be clear that you and I aren't de-sexifying that stuff. Like Juliet says, all right, here's our long-term plan. Here's how we're going to get this done. Here's the content you need to produce. And I know Ashley does the same. And it's just as sexy. I do look forward to the day where I think Juliet may run for government one day, and I just can't wait to be the first man. I want to hold teas.
That'd be so awesome.
And
I want to you guys. It'd be great.
I just want to staple papers for her and lift stuff and let her do all of the public BS. But the main thing is, once again though, however you work this out, you've got to create and envision a life that where you what is your goal? Your goal is to be able to travel, and one of our goals was to be able to go teach in another country and be able to bring my kids, and we're there. And I'm not saying we're all going to do that. Right. But you can still create. There are, I think, still untapped in terms of excellent physical therapists developing long-term relationships with people. Like there's never going to be too many of us, and there's so many talented people there. We just have to figure out a way where you can be reimbursed in a way that you're not getting $30 for an hour session, and your time is better reflected in doing something else. You should be able to pay off your student loan debt, and save for the future, and not work 70 hours a week for someone else. Right.
Man, it's so spot on. This is great. I knew this would be a really good conversation. I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people, and hopefully they can take some of the lessons learned from what you've done and in the the years of your experience in business and multiple kinds of business, and really pay it forward. And I think the overall message is what you keep saying, man. Like, why are you doing this stuff? Like, what does it come back to? And being able to keep that stuff in perspective. It's very motivating, but it also keeps you grounded so that you don't spin out of control. And no one wants to finish by themselves, right? Like,
that's right. And you can't burn out. You can't afford to burn out. And I saw that burnout. I saw what it looked like, and I was like, ooh, I'm not having it. I got to a place where I wasn't having any fun. Right. And remember why, I always say, remember why you went to physio school? People are like, because I want to help people. I'm like, bullshit. That's not what it is. It's because you are a nerd and you like the work. Yeah. Like, that's what it's about. Like, I like the work. I like the tooling. I like the coaching. I like the hands-on. I like the conversations about it. I love the work. And so you just got to keep it in a place where you can then just love the work, and not be underpaid or undervalued for that experience.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. Kelly, thanks so much for your time. I mean, I know people, they should know who you are. I'm sure if they don't, www.mobilitywod.com is the easiest place to find a Mobility Wod on their social media handles. Instagram's awesome. You guys are active on Twitter as well. So if people want to reach out to you, they can find you there. Kelly, we really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. Any parting words you want to give, PT, future and or current entrepreneurs out there about the future of, what they should be doing in business?
Well, I think that the physio entrepreneur is in a unique place to really, instead of sort of carve out your own island, like what we used to do. Hey, okay, I'm just have this independent practice that's slightly different than everyone else. I think we can really shape public expectation of what good care is. And it's not that the physios working in these traditional clinics aren't giving good care, but the clinic, it may not be, or the hospital may not be the best place to deliver that. And I think we can really give this voice where we can spend more time with people and play a much longer game where that conversation is about all the aspects of someone's physical carriage.
That's perfect. You guys heard here, Dr. Kelly Starrett. He's the man, one of my favorite people, and so awesome to talk to him about business and where they've been. Hope you guys learned a lot from this one. So, guys, it's a PT Entrepreneur. Hit us up if you have any questions. Shoot me an email. You got my direct email. That's right. I give it out, and I do answer that stuff. So if you have a question, I love to talk business, and I'd love to connect with you. So, guys, thanks so much for listening, and take care.